The Girl with the Roman Candle Scar. I think it was back in 1997 or 1998. I can't be sure. It was summer, and that meant it was time for the Kresner family and Craig family. I've changed all the names, by the way. Tradition of leaving town and heading up to Grand Lake for the 4th of July. It was a high and low point for me in the summer of things to do. A high point in the sense that I didn't have to work or bum around the suburbs ad nauseum for a few days. But like that Christmassy, festival, carefree vibe everyone seems to get leading up to a holiday, the reality of it never quite lives up to the hype. And often the reality of it is a chunk full of extra work and disappointment. I think this was mostly because of the Craigs. They usually hijacked the entire event and made it about their family, and we were just along for the ride. I guess that's how the whole tradition got started, in fact. We, the Kresnors, and the Craigs were next-door neighbors, who barely ever talked until a few years ago. By coincidence, we rented out neighboring cabins at Grand Lake, and ever since then, it's been about the same deal every year, even after they moved to a distant state. While the elder Craigs certainly did pull their usual bullshit, 1998 was really special. It was really like that one Christmas, that archetypal one, where so much happens that it colors the rest of them. This really was the summer to end all summers. And well, I guess after you're done hearing the story, you'll realize how close it might have been being true for all of us. I was a junior in high school that year, so it must have been 1998, thinking a bit more about it now. I was a really unremarkable kid with B's in school, working at a movie theater making popcorn, and I didn't really have many friends. I was mostly afraid of my own shadow, and I always colored inside the lines. I was an only child with 2 working parents, so taking care of myself was a major part of my life. Everyone else at school and work were more like acquaintances, people you sat with at lunch or partnered up with in gym class for racquetball, or someone you said a special hello to at the concession stand. That they were painfully boring and drab. They were clones. I was a clone. The days were carbon copies of themselves. I spent most of my time reading and playing video games. I would occasionally try out for a school activity, and I was always pretty mediocre at it. Whether it was track or academic Q&A. I'd do it for a semester, get that college application line, and drop it the next. Nothing was too thrilling. It just was what it was. Going into that summer, I had no idea what I wanted to do after high school. The path was more or less in front of me. My life was a string of dominoes. After high school, I would fall into college. After college, I was supposed to fall into a job. I was supposed to have choice there. A choice if I wanted to go, where I wanted to go, and what I wanted to study. I just couldn't get that excited about it. I couldn't see anything but the dominoes. A few times, Mom tried to get me to see a shrink. She thought I was depressed or I was ADD. I think she just wanted me to do something besides what I did, even if that meant swallowing horse pills for no medically justified reason. Like I said before, I think I just was who I was. I wasn't really depressed or confused, but I was definitely anxious. Not like anxious on a day-to-day basis, but top-down worldview anxious in the sense that someone gets while falling. I guess, again, pressing this metaphor to the breaking point like a domino. It was how I saw the future, really. I saw my parents do what they did. Go to work, watch TV, go to sleep, wake up arguing, my dad professing his love for my mother, mowing the lawn on weekends, going to sleep, then going back to work. I was in the glide path, so to speak, for that suburban life, that carbon copy of their life, just because they wanted me to do something to dig them out of a funk of their own making didn't mean anything to me. Even if I felt like I was on a collision course with the trap of mediocrity. Their panic at my condition made me understand their infatuation with the Craigs. Jack Craig, the patriarch of that household, was a Gulf War fighter pilot veteran who scored 2 air-to-air combat kills against airborne Iraqi helicopters by dropping bombs, not shooting guns, not shooting heat-seeking or radar missiles, but dropping free-fall dumb bombs on them as he zipped over them on his way to Baghdad to bomb something else. He got shot down, held off an Iraqi platoon with a handgun before he was rescued, and then shot up them all while manning the machine gun on the rescue helicopter. And we never, ever stopped hearing about it. He was all about big cars, fast bikes, over-the-top outfits that would make professional wrestling blush. And just straight up being the loudest, most attention-seeking motherfucker in the room. He was hot shit, and he knew it, and he let everyone else know about it too. All the fucking time. His son, Bobby, was excelling in Air Force ROTC in his second year of college. Jack thought he, too, was hot shit, and he knew it, and both let each other know it, and everyone else know it too. And that brings me to his wife, Nancy, whom I'm pretty sure I never heard say a sentence without the phrase, "yes, dear," in it. I don't think I've ever seen her in something other than a dress or an apron. And then there was Jackie. Jackie was the Craig's daughter, and as basic as I described myself to be, of course, as cliche as it could get, she was the reason for the season, so to speak. It wasn't always the case. It usually was a no-holds-barred fireworks show. Jackie was a big pyro too, and she always helped me put on the big fireworks display. Because those tiny explosives were beneath Jack and Bobby, and I think Dad was honestly afraid of them. Anyway, last year while lighting off fireworks, I accidentally hit Jackie with a Roman candle, and it burned and scarred her upper arm. Usually that would be a good jumping off point for any acquaintanceship, no matter how distant or infrequent an encounter. But instead, while I was helping her find a first aid kit to treat the burn, we started talking about life and stuff like that, and it was a nice conversation. The kind of conversation that draws you intellectually, physically, and emotionally close to someone. It was the kind of thing that made you wish we lived close together again, or had the guts just to call her. Deep in the squiggles of our brains, I think we saw a beautiful person buried under her circumstances. Not exactly in the same way I was, but close enough to feel a genuine connection, a way no one else made me feel. It felt safe to talk to her about things that bothered me, and I think she felt the same way. I was really exhilarated to see her again, even if I had to put up with Jack and Bobby and how inevitably they would fuck everything up, starting with turning Mom and Dad into their stooges. I think the thing about Jackie was she was a lot like me. I faced no pressure, well, comparatively no pressure, against me being me. But she lived with 2 giant pressures. She had to be great, or she had to be Nancy. It was an unenviable, inevitable choice. But it was also a false dichotomy. Nothing else in her life brought me the same kind of excitement as I felt when I was around her and when she talked. I felt like she had the same feelings towards me, so I would often fantasize about getting into some college with her and spending a lot of time traveling. To where I never could see that. I just saw her. I just saw her and going. The place didn't matter. The velocity did. In the sea of meaningless of my life, she mattered. Anyway, I'm getting way into the weeds on this. We got to the cabin late on account of Dad forgetting to stop the mail for the time we'd be gone. and then getting caught in all the northbound holiday traffic. I sweltered while Mom and Dad argued about whether or not the air conditioning was working or not in the car. I assure you, as strongly as I assured them, it was not fucking working. We got there about 4 hours later than we wanted to. This was distressing to me for a number of reasons. The first reason was obvious: less time with Jackie. The second, less time to get fireworks, and possibly fewer to purchase. And third, well, Jack's crash and burn short fuse. When we pulled up, Jack was proudly lunging beside a charcoal grill, wearing shorts and a t-shirt, which looked like it had been made from an American flag, wraparound shades, red, white, and blue flip-flops, and a big red hat, nearly matching the shade of his forehead, with an American flag iron-on completed the ensemble. Born in the USA, blasted wildly into the air from the stereo up on the porch railing of the cabin. He picked up a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels and took a mighty swig, gargling at first like mouthwash before giving an exaggerated "ah" in refreshment. It was at that point I realized he was wearing a belt holster. On one side, a place to nestle his bottle of Jack. On the other, what I presume to be a fully loaded, semi-automatic 9mm handgun. So, Jack's fuse was already lit. He was drunk, and he was always already drunk. And he was always the first to black out and go down for the night, usually even before the fireworks. I didn't think it was because he couldn't stand being at the center of attention for even the 5-minute duration of the lake-wide sporadic firework display put on by the various cabin renters. But it was also because it was Jack. He lurched up from his seat toward the car and gave a big, loud, jolly, "Howdy there, prisoners. How about this heat? Shucks, you couldn't make it up yesterday. But, you know, I guess there's Call of Duty, and then Call of the Wild." He leaned in to give my dad a hug, and in the process my dad seemed to disappear under his arms, neck, and upper chest. I gritted my teeth. Jackie or no Jackie, this was already sucking. I wanted to go find her, get on our bikes, hit the trails, and head to the fireworks stands before they closed, or got too picked over by other happy pyro tourists. Mom started unloading the car while Jack put a bottle of Jack and a spatula in my dad's hand and told him to catch up. I helped my mom out a bit, a token gesture, but I was really anxious to get the car clear enough to get my bike out and reattach the wheel. I looked around for Jackie, but I didn't see her yet. No doubt she was inside with Nancy working on the food. I swatted a mosquito away from my head as a can of bug spray came rolling out across the car roof at my face. "Hey, it's mil-spec. Makes you radioactive to those bloodsuckers." Bobby came out from the trees, which led to the lake and the dock. "I also have some barrier cream if you're interested. You know, to prevent what happened last year." He gave me a toothy, self-satisfied grin. "Last year I got poison ivy on my crotch. I'm not telling how." I just smiled back at him. "How thoughtful. Thanks." "No problem. Hey, I'm working on getting the ski-doo working. If I figure it out, you can take her for a ride later." "Sure. Thanks." It was a lie, I told myself. Bobby traditionally monopolized the family water go-kart, and I never had on a turn on it before, so why would this time be any different? Jackie said, "You were going to get fireworks later?" "Yeah. Where is she?" "She's inside. Just make sure you don't get anything gay, like fountains or sparklers," he said. "Loud and proud, baby." I nodded. I had budgeted about $50 for fireworks, which I felt I could comfortably haul in one backpack. It was even more imperative now that I found Jackie, got her bag, and we hit the trails. I started heading toward the Craig family cabin, which was pretty much side by side to our cabin when I crossed the road. From the small cabin to the right side of the lake ridge came a frantic "Fire in the hole!" I turned and I saw two shirtless, overweight men in their middle 20s with long hair and tie-dyed swim trunks, light one of those tube mortar fireworks. And then, as the lead one was backing up, he tripped and fell over a piece of plywood with the mortar tube resting on it, knocking the tube over with the muzzle pointed in my direction. The firework ignited, skipping on the ground at an awkward angle before the shell exploded about 20 feet over our heads in a deafening roar. Mom and Nancy came running out of the house while Dad rose from ducking behind Jack. Jack didn't flinch, but he immediately started screaming at them. Specifically, he called them a couple of moron faggots several times as the two goofs skedaddled back into their cabin. I think my dad had said something to the effect, "Why are you calling them faggots?" "Because they are," Jack exclaimed. "I heard them sucking dick earlier, that's for sure. Ought to be a law." Well, since you put it that way, Dad predictably sided with Jack. "Let's not let it ruin our trip, dear," Nancy said as she stepped in behind him. "No, nothing is going to ruin this trip. Not even a couple of faggots." Jack had the last word, as usual. The smoke of the shell cleared, and all the commotion finally roused Jackie from the cabin. "Hey," Mom said. "Come in here, Greg. Let's get this food cranking." Dad nodded back in agreement, but Jack moved in to stop him. "Ah, no, you don't. Nope. See, this holiday is all about making more noise than someone else, especially if it's someone you don't like. Now, those fairies got a nice loud first word in, but we have something to put them in their place, see? It's not only our right, it's our duty. See, I got some cans set up on the other side of the house," Jack said while removing his pistol from the holster and placing it in my dad's hands, which are held out as if he were in church receiving communion. "So you want to come around back and make some noise with me?" "Huh?" Jack asked. Mom threw down her hands while Nancy fluttered over to her. "Oh, it'll be fun. Let the boys go. We'll have some bonding time." They both disappeared behind the screen door of the cabin. Gunshots rang out from behind the house, followed by my dad's patented Woody Woodpecker-style laugh. And by the lake, a Ski-Doo engine tried to turn over. Jackie looked at me from the porch with suspicious and narrow eyes. She sipped Pepsi in blue jean cutoff shorts and a pink tank top that was vaguely too young looking for her. Her hair was cut short and shaded with a slight autumn orange tint. The scar on her arm from last year was plainly visible. "How's it doing?" I meant, what's going on? What is going on? She looked at me incredulously. Do you want to try that again, cowboy?" I think I panicked. I mean, how's the scar? It's barely noticeable. I feigned trying to locate it on her arm. "It's fine. How's the crotch?" "Oh," I took a long pause. Oh, you remember that too." It was hilarious. "You know, Bobby bought some barrier cream for." "Yeah, I don't think I want that, but do you want to get fireworks?" "Fuck yeah." Jackie finished her drink and pitched the can in the recycling. "I got a backpack ready on my bike already." Nancy came shrieking from behind the screen door. "Jackie, Winnie, Craig, talk like a lady!" Jackie rolled her eyes and slid off the railing to the ground, her sandals kicking up a tiny cloud of dust. "Great, let's go." We mounted the bikes and slipped between the evergreens on a worn bike path. We knew the trail by heart. It was about 2 miles to the fireworks stand. The trails were rough, lots of ups and downs. We went single file over narrow sections, splashing through creeks, and dodged low tree branches. We didn't talk much. It was actually more of a strenuous trip than I remembered last year. We got to the Worthington city limit, where it was legal to buy fireworks, but not possess them or use them, unless you bought the transport permit. It was legal to use them, but not buy them back at Grand Lake. The state firework laws made no sense, but ultimately they were available and legal to fire where we were going. Even the big ones. We dismounted and walked our bikes through the crowded drive-up grass parking lot. There was a hustle in the air, not unlike last-minute Christmas shopping, as we approached the tents and started milling around the merchandise. We found the fireworks tent to be well stocked, surprisingly, if not underwhelming. We reluctantly threw in the available stables. 100-shot Saturn missile battery, yawn. 12 box of festival shells, typical. Box thing with an eagle on it, predictable. Many of the items are leaking powder, had washed out colors on the wrappers, looked like it might explode in undesirable ways or not light at all. The rest of it, the packaging was damaged in Chinese or drab to the point where we couldn't make heads or tails about what it would do. But like I said, Jackie and I were pyro pros, even if for only one night of the year. So we knew what to look for, what to buy, what to skip, and what would, if looked at funnily, could take your hand off. How do you stand out among them? Jackie volunteered at a rhetorical question while looking at two similar types of rockets from two different brands. How do you mean? I asked. Your folks, she asked. Like, what do you have to do to stand out from them? Do they make you make everything about themselves? I guess not. I think they want me to express myself more. I don't know. I guess it's not like the situation you're in. I don't have a sibling to compete with. Technically, Jackie said, hanging her head. Neither do I. I literally can't even begin to compete. It's not a contest. He's a dude, in a military family. He's literally the greatest thing since sliced Jack. And Mom, I can't do that. She exhaled heavily. There's women in the Air Force, I hazarded. I know. It's not really where my head's at. Even if it was, I think it would give too much away. I wouldn't make anything any better. It's probably not a safe place to go. I'm trapped in a ball of remarkably unremarkable mediocrity. I launched into a half-life story, half a tirade without passion. I just leaked out, like a pudding cup dropped on the floor. What I felt I needed to say to her. It's okay, it's early in life. It doesn't mean that I'm not destined, or you're not destined to, or we are destined to end up like our families. I don't think it's worth worrying about. I lied to her, enthusiastically, because for the moment, being around her drained away that anxiety. When? I'm sorry? When is it worth worrying about? College? I hazarded. I don't think I want to worry about it then. I want to worry about it now, so I can do something about it while I'm in college, she said. Any thoughts on where you want to go and what you want to do? Isn't that what we're talking about? I stammered. No. Yes. Maybe. I'm sorry. I didn't get a lot of chances to talk to anyone about this sort of thing. Neither do I. Jackie's eyes seemed to bug out in disbelief. I guess we both suck at this. At this too, right? I didn't reply because I saw Crazy Kaczynski's, yep, that's really what it was called, Firework Emporium employee unload a new box from the storage tent. Inside the box was a series of long tubes, about twice the size of a normal Roman candle tube, rolled together into something vaguely resembling a Gatling gun. Maybe, I said. But I know that doesn't suck, I said, pointing to the item blazoned with the colorful, exaggerated label, Ultimate Ray Gun. I raced over and plucked two of the massive pieces of pyrotechnic ordnance out of the box. They were basically 12 100-shot Roman candles strung together in one convenient war crime-sized package. They were expensive, but I had enough to buy 4 of these. Score, Jackie said as she picked up 2 of the 4 and carried them to the checkout. I guess if I get hit with one of these things, I might lose my arm, she said sarcastically. We took the long way home, across a few winding trails deeper into the woods surrounding the lake. We ignored the mosquitoes for the most part, but I'll admit I was extra careful looking out for those leaves of 3. Maybe I was being paranoid about it. Jackie, of course, called me out on it. I nervously laughed it off. I honestly don't know how I got poison ivy on me, at all, much less my legs painted and crotch. But so it goes. You know, the year before was so bad, she said in reflection. It's like I can't take another goddamn year in this bullshit. I'm gonna lose it. I wish they would just throw me out of their house, Jackie said as we snaked along a weaving, dipping path in the thinning daylight. No matter how great I could be, I'll just be me. It'll never be good for them, she said. I know exactly what you mean, I said between huffing and puffing up and down the mounds. No matter what I do, how adequately I do it, there's always something more, something in the back of my head. It's good enough, but is it? Maybe, I could just shed my skin like a snake, a new skin, new colors, new lines to trace. I said this partially because I saw a snake skin on the ground, and I did not like snakes, and I had snakes in my mind at the time. Jackie squeezed the brakes fully and came to a skidding stop. I barely managed to stop before bashing into her. You know what, Simon? She said, taking a fairly large pocket knife out of her side pocket. You're absolutely right. It's time to make a pledge. It's time to make a pledge to make a change. She brandished the knife, blade out at me before turning it to the side of a tree. She chiseled into the bark, out in 1999. She then carved her name. She handed me the blade, and I struggled a bit before I figured out it was okay to make the S in my name look kind of like a Z. This time, next year, it's going to be so different. I hope so, I said, fiddling with the blade to hand it back to her. I know so. Well, it's up there now. Nothing can take that away, right? It's there forever, like the scar, she said, laughing. Maybe you can burn that on me so I don't forget. So I don't inevitably chicken out again. I knew something about chickening out. I was doing it right there and then. I was standing awkwardly, rubbing my hands free of the strain and pain of not knowing how to carve my name into the tree. All of that instead of trying to hug and kiss her, because that was like the moment, right? Talk about fulfilling the change right there and then. At the very minimum, I at least could have gotten her number, because I didn't have it anymore. But nope. I think we got back around 7. We were hungry, and the family food and table was the only game in town right now. Unfortunately, that meant family discussion start with the quality of the mayonnaise. Jack took the opportunity to fill everyone in on Bobby's fantastic exploits and heap praise on him. He's the son of a shepherd, and one day he will make a great one to the sheep in his life, Jack said repeatedly in many permutations. I swear I watched Mom and Dad clap harder for him than they ever did for anything I ever did. Even that one time I got elected to student council, albeit by default, but still. Somehow my poison ivy crotch thing came up again, and I just wanted to leave. But then Nancy used it as a segue to tell everyone Jackie had recently accidentally got gum in her hair, and that's why it was so short. Jackie let a few over-the-top laughs rip at herself. It was painful to listen to, but apparently only to me. So I got up and left. I was hoping Jackie would follow, but she got hung up on asking for permission to leave. Something, apparently at this age, they still did. Bobby let us know the Ski-Doo was working, and tossed the key to me. Jackie said she wanted to go for a ride, so we got on it and rode around the lake as the sky turned shades of autumn and grape. It was getting dark fast, and pretty soon it would be time to light up the sky again. I was actually okay at driving this thing, probably one of the few things I did well without thinking too hard about it. We coasted by the shore for a bit. The motor was too loud to have any real conversation. I had a million things in my mind, but they all went away while her arms were wrapped around my stomach as I zipped around the lake. After a while, we just coasted and floated. We watched frogs and turtles swim about. I had to put gum in my hair to get it cut short, Jackie said, out of the blue. I think I was just having an eighth of a life crisis or something. She went on to pantomime her father. Boys have short hair, girls have long hair. I like your hair, I told her. Thanks. Have you ever thought about growing yours out? All the time, I lied. I just don't really want to take care of it. You're a dude, you don't have to. Just let it go like those guys. She pointed to the two overweight guys who fucked up launching fireworks earlier as they lounged on the small beach in front of their own cabin. Here, come on, I want you to meet them. They're really cool, laid-back dudes. I pulled the Skidoo up to the dock and tied it up. Hey, dudes, she said. This is my bud. They both gave a lethargic meh as they seemed glued to their chairs, but eventually everyone introduced themselves. One of them was named Tim and the other was named Seth. They apologized for the firework incident before. Then they called Jack an asshole. We all laughed, and it was all good vibes from that point on. Jackie mentioned that we had gotten some fireworks. But Seth had interrupted the conversation about fireworks with an urgent question. Dude. Did you see anything in the woods that was weird while you were going to the fireworks store? Or back? I was intrigued. Like what? Like a UFO. No, I said, surprised. I think you guys had too much of this weed, Jackie said, picking up a lit joint from Tim. Dude, we were sober as judges. Maybe I was. You were not, Tim butted in. Whatever, jackass. Seth paused, then continued. Anyway, it was about the size of a large dog. It was floating in midair in a clearing. It was white and shimmering, and it made no noise. It let out a green light from its side towards us. It then left a brown mark on the spot it was hovering over, and then it just vanished, like disappeared, as it started to lift off. Right, Tim? Tim reluctantly exhaled a cloud of pot. I didn't see shit, man. I saw a green light, and then you freaked out. And Ms. Craig is right. You're too fucking high. It's probably a government thing, if anything at all. It wasn't a helicopter. It couldn't fit a person inside. Jackie brought up the fact that the future of airplanes are unmanned remote-controlled vehicles, and that they would be small like that. Yeah, right. So, like, a guy is going to sit in a bunker in Nevada and go bombing something far away by remote control. That's gotta be some kind of war crime. Pfft, would never happen, Seth confirmed. Right, Jackie said in a huff. Seth, can I hit this? Jackie said, holding up the joint. Sure, we brought tons. It's ready to rock. Fuck yeah, Jackie said excitedly. I wish I ran into you two earlier. It's so hard for me to keep this on the down low back home. Jackie looked like she knew what she was doing. I didn't know what she was doing. I never tried weed or any other drug, or even drank it, even at this point in my life. It was startling to see Miss Straight Edge, by home doctrine, carelessly trek into drugdom. She took off the off-white stick to her lips and sucked in syrupy vapors. She held it in like a pro. I understood the joint itself to be a giant exclamation point on her 8th life crisis. Jackie started to sputter, and I came close to help her as she hacked out. There's no such thing as UFOs. Fuck! She cried, taking another drag, the red light of the ash shining off her eyes. I'm starting to sound like my dad. It was something, Seth said. I just think about relativistic speeds and the vast distance of space and the relative non-importance of Earth compared to everything else a space-faring civilization might look at or want to go to. Like, think about it. Even if they saw Earth and they had the ability to sketch out a look at our civilization from somewhere, imagine the light distance they would travel. They see us thousands of years in the past. We're barely Homo sapiens then, and then it takes time to get here. Seth picked up. Yeah, they would probably be interested in something that would last long enough for them to harvest it when they got here. Maybe the water or something. Maybe tomorrow, Jackie said after taking another hit, we can see your UFO landing site. But now that I'm lit up, I really just want to paint the sky. While I was fascinated by Seth and Tim's UFO talk, I was stunned by Jackie's acts. I was kind of stunned by everything. Even Seth and Tim and their gayness, the way she casually handled the joint made me realize it wasn't her first time. That was an expectation as she handed it to me. My hands were sweaty and shaky to feel the illegal object in my hands and the very real possibility of me smoking it. I felt like a caveman holding a burning stick for the first time, knowing it was hot and that it had burned my friend. I didn't have any particular hang-ups on it. I just had been so indoctrinated to oppose it at this point in my life. I wasn't sure how to play it, so I sputtered out, Is it good? It's good, Jackie said. Really kind of plays on you with your perceptions. It's kind of dreamy. If it's your first time, you might see little trails behind lights. Oh, yeah. Everyone gets that their first time. I remember that. I tried to play it cool, but I wasn't playing it well. Here, she said, pressing the crunchy, skunky paper to my lips. Just breathe. It's like being tickled from the inside out. I inhaled, and it was oddly smooth, but it tasted like I was drinking whatever came out of a skunk's orifice. But I held back both my cough and near vomit as smoke poured out of me and Jackie took another hit. I stood feeling like someone was playing with the hairs on the back of my neck, and then at random my vision changed ever so slightly. Like they're running low on options at the ophthalmologist's office when A and B almost look the same, but you can just barely tell as the doctor swaps between them. Hey, do you guys want to synchronize the fireworks shows? Jackie asked Tim and Seth. Maybe, if we can get it up, he said, laughing. I mean, I'd invite you over to join ours. No thanks. Your dad made it clear about how he feels about us. Right, prick? I started up the hill towards the cabins. I could see the orange glow of the bonfire flicker up behind the trees. I could hear my mother and father start to chant for fireworks. I could also see Nancy, Bobby, and Jack's outlined by the fire. Jack was completely horizontal, completely conked out from the drinking, as usual. A few were already going off in the distance. They were professional and from the communities in the north and west. I almost tripped over a rock because I wasn't looking where I was going. I was thinking about how I just did drugs for the first time in my life. How Jackie de-virginized me to that, and also, if I smelled it, if Mom and Dad could tell, I wondered if they cared. But I knew they cared. And I knew that they cared. And, I told Jackie we were going to set up the fireworks right near the street. It was the flattest and safest spot, only slightly tilted, but tilted towards the lake. I thought about Jack laying chemically comatose in his lawn chair while the rest of us were out having the time of our lives. Families across the lake launched a bright barrage of color. It shimmered across the lake and burst in the sky. A few of their shots were duds, though they went up with a bright head of color, but they didn't burst. Jackie and I had this down. We barely needed to talk about it. I set up the tubes, she unwrapped the shells, and we dropped them in their respective tubes one at a time and lit them. The small shells whirled up, with a slight glow skyward before exploding into a shower of red and green stars. We had joined the battle of Grand Lake. A second barrage, and then a third. On the fourth, I became concerned that I was having an adverse reaction to the cannabis. The two bursts looked like they slanted one direction, as if blown or pushed by an invisible force, and at the same time the sky adjacent to the colors seemed to shimmer, not unlike water reflected against a broken mirror in the sky. We fired a fifth duo of mortars, and those blasts created the outline of a pointed wedge in the sky. In the clear, star-glitter night sky, something was there, something pointed, something triangular, see-through, but low enough to be hit by the fireworks. My mom had gotten up from her seat around the bonfire and called out to us, "Hey, did you guys see that?" I did see that, and so did Jackie as she stopped reloading her tube. We both froze as the sky seemed to unzip with a piercing white light. Then the outline of a triangle, easily the size of a football field, appeared like a jagged shard of glass against the sky. It happened within a few blinks, really, and then all of a sudden looking at a dark arrowhead-like craft with 4 points of light, one at each point and one in the center, hovering silently over the lake. I could see the craft was not uniform in construction, with small bulges and blisters along the edges and underneath. The lights themselves seemed to pulsate and bulge and change shape ever so slightly. All of the fireworks from all of the lake cabins stopped. My mom started to scream, and I could hear my dad yelling at Jack that there was a UFO. Over the commotion, I heard Jack shouting one thing. It was the only thing that he did during the entire incident. "There's no such thing as UFOs." We watched breathlessly as suddenly dozens of small, egg-shaped white objects, similar to what Seth and Tim described, descended from the center light under the craft. Each of the objects were self-illuminated with an orange and green pulse, washed out almost entirely by their bright white luminosity. They swarmed under the craft in numbers that numbered well over 100. Their coordinated aerial acrobatics transitioned from synchronized flying into an interstellar bucket brigade. They formed a three-point chain from the swirling, sinking helix in the middle. They descended near to the surface of the lake before striking it with a orange glow, and then rapidly ascended into one of the 3 points of light at the tips. The water became agitated. The entire lake seemed to start swirling and whirlpooling to the pickup point. Meanwhile, the Arrowhead mothership was swelling, bubbling out along its sides and belly, as if somehow growing, like a water balloon taking a trickle from the garden hose. In 5 minutes, the lake was already down several feet from its original depth. I don't know who started the fireworks again or who fired the first shots, but we saw and heard fireworks ring out at the small orbs as they soaked up the water and deposited it back into the mothership. As they slurped up the lake, the shallower sections to the east were becoming darker and filled with brown seaweed mash. Sensing their task was nearly completion, most of the egg ships broke into small groups and took to an arrowhead formation and swarmed out in all directions, where fireworks and gunfire started to plink away at them. That included Jackie and myself, and both families up by the fire. I didn't know who was shooting from the fire. I knew it wasn't Jack or Nancy. I couldn't ask my folks at this point, but someone was, and it attracted a fleet of 6 of those white orbs. They had no visible means of propulsion, and they could maneuver in any direction instantly. They were also very fast, and they were swarming on us. Jackie and I tried to run, but they got on us, and put some sort of green light to our heads. The light itself wasn't a beam, more like a laser, like the price code scanners at the supermarket. I could see on the hill that they were doing the same thing to my folks and the Craigs. I was afraid. As soon as I saw the light hit my mom's outline, she stopped screaming, mid-breath, and just stood there, as if frozen in time and space. They swarmed around the trees. They launched their orange beams at one, sometimes multiple eggs, multiple beams for large trees. The trees wilted, dropping brown leaves, and then crumpled in moments after contact with the beam. The green beam blinked on and off on my head and on Jackie's. Whatever it was doing to everyone else, making them quiet, or maybe killing them by sucking out all the water out of their bodies. Whatever it wasn't happening to us. The 8 crafts seemed to back off, climb to a higher altitude above us, but still shadowed us as if confused by our non-susceptibility to the beams. Or if we confused them about what they saw in our minds. I bolted for the bonfire. I needed to see what it did to Mom and Dad. Jackie followed close behind. A large chunk of the swarm dissipated in different directions, but we can see them bob and weave around the forest, rapidly reducing trees to piles of sawdust, like Pearl Arbor Day. Mom was frozen in place with her eyes partially rolled back into her head. She was stiff and stuck in place with the force of all her might. She was still breathing, and her heart was still beating. By all indications, she was still alive, but stuck in some kind of frozen trance. Jackie tended everyone else, who apparently was in the same state. "What the hell is going on?" Jackie finally said something. "I don't know. It's an invasion. They're here to take our damn water." "How do we get rid of them? How do we snap them out of this?" From the slope, I could hear two out-of-breath voices call out to us. "Hey, guys! Guys!" It was Tim and Seth. "What the hell is going on?" Tim cried out as he ran up to the fire, much faster than I could imagine he would be able to run. "I don't know. What's wrong with them?" Seth said, snapping his fingers in front of my unresponsive father. "They hit him with a green ray or something," I said. "We get hit by green rays too," Tim said, swinging the joint around. "It didn't do this to us," Seth said. "Maybe it's because they're not fucked up." "Well, I mean, they're fucked up, but like on alcohol and boredom." Jackie said, grabbing the joint from Tim. "Come on, hit this shit. I bet it's what's keeping them from getting us." Just as he said that, another squadron dive-bombed us, unleashing more brilliant green halos just over our heads. I remember hearing something, approximating another voice or thought in my head. It wasn't my own. It was a strong flash of unease and confusion, nearing a sense of frustration. It sent reverberations in my head. It made me feel like I wanted something just out of my reach. Then my memory. Like I was trying to remember something in a crunch, but I couldn't. Jackie thrust the joint into my face, and I had no choice but to take a big hit. After coughing like hell, it suddenly hit me. It was all sticking out of Jackie's and my backpack. I had this really, really interesting idea suddenly come together. So I started sputtering out this long, insane. "Do you guys remember, like, when you were talking about cosmic distances, the amount of time it would take spacecraft to get here?" Tim and Seth looked at me, confused. "Why? Work with me a second. If I'm here to mine water and I'm expecting some form of intelligent life, right, who's to say that life couldn't fight back?" "It tried. We're trying right now to figure that out," Tim shouted back. "Right, but it didn't kill anyone, right? It just froze us here, and they're trying to scan and screw with our heads, right? So how does this help us right now? What if they saw us like having slings and rocks and bows and arrows, and they thought by the time they got here we would still be technologically limited, like we couldn't fight back? Well, we are technologically limited. But what if we can trick them? Like we're already tricking them. Being high is tricking their mind rays. What if we think really hard the next time they come up and zap us that we have like advanced laser weapons or something?" "You're fucking crazy. Let's just call the Air Force or something," Seth protested. "And they'll do what? Get brain zapped out of midair? If they can even get off the ground?" I said. "The cell phone is dead anyway," said Tim. "I don't know if there's one ship or more, if it's one and more on the way, but we have a chance to maybe scare these guys off now. We've stumbled onto something that's holding them off. We've got to try this." For the record, I was spitting all this out very high. "Look," I pointed. "Here they come for another pass. Huddle together and think about ray guns blowing them up." "Dude, we don't even know if they have a sense of self-preservation," Seth cried out. "Ray guns!" I shouted as the eggs circled us and bathed us again in green laser light. "Okay." Again, the laser blinked and flickered, and I heard or felt the presence in my mind as I thought about shooting red and green balls of particular plasma laser phaser tasers out of my hands at them, and marveling as I shot down egg after egg. There was a scene playing out in my head, and it was my dad telling me awkwardly about that famous part in Dirty Harry. Make my day, but with a question mark. It was odd because it never happened in real life, and I actually never saw that movie either, but somehow it was all oddly referentially played out through multiple lenses of perception. The formation of UFOs broke off from us again. The four of us looked at each other with the same face. It was the face that said we knew exactly what to do now. The aliens were skeptical we had advanced weapons, but we needed to show them that we did. We'll take our roof. We'll take the Ski-Doo. Tim and Seth headed for the roof. Jackie and I headed for the Ski-Doo. One by one, we carefully hopped onto the Ski-Doo, now floating perilously close to the bottom of the shallow water. She stuck her hands down the middle of the Roman candle Gatling guns, while I lit the long fuse on each one. I gripped the throttle and we took off to the center of the lake. I was having controlling it because it felt like I was sledding water downhill rather than ripping across it. Doubts started to fill my mind as we approached. The mothership and the eggs took gunfire and mortar shells prior to silencing them. I only believed what energy weapons looked like from sci-fi. There was no scientific basis I knew of what to indicate that if they existed in reality, they would look like what I thought they should. Finally, I was trying to reproduce that appearance with more fireworks. The only hint I had it might work was the awkward uncertainty the craft and the occupants seemed to communicate to me. It was a moment of vulnerability, and it was my only chance. I looked back for a second as Seth and Tim's cabin roof lit up with an intense barrage of red, green, white, and blue flaming balls whizzing about in all directions. They laid into the marauding clusters of eggs, and those returned to their ships filled with water from wherever they had sucked it dry from. I approached at full speed as our ray gun Roman candle Gatling guns started to ignite and fire. Jackie swung her body into my high-speed turns as shot after shot after shot began to lash the bucket brigade. Immediately that formation broke, and the ship stopped siphoning water from the lake. The whirlpool had closed, leaving a bit of a lake which jostled the Ski-Doo. Jackie gripped me tight and let go of one of the Roman candles she had sleeved. I just barely caught it out of midair before it hit the water, and gripped it tight while aiming it skyward, just in time for another series of ignitions and a furious fusillade of flaming shots. I swung the Ski-Doo around once more, and I watched as wave after wave of egg-shaped ships returned to the center light of the triangular mothership. Just as suddenly as it appeared, when the last leg seemed to come on board, the ship shrunk to a quarter of its size, and then a quarter of that, and then shot up and away, in the loudest sonic boom I've ever heard. The stars were blotted out in its wake, and a torrential downpour gripped the entire area for 5 minutes. It was impossible to navigate or to get to shore. We were trapped in a sandwich of water. All we could do was hold on tight to the Ski-Doo and each other. When it was all over, we found ourselves washed up on the beach, still holding tight to each other. The ship was gone. The eggs were gone. Some intense waves lapped up upon us. In the distance, all around the lake, bugs resumed their song. Fires away from the downpour crackled. The sky was clear. Then, one by one, the fireworks resumed again. Aside from the dozens of dead trees and a highly disturbed lake, there was a sense that none of what had just happened, beside us knowing about it, we were the only ones who knew about it. But we knew we won. That end of the movie triumph swept over me, and I swung over Jackie, and I leaned in and I kissed her. I pressed in my lips to her, softly. She didn't do anything. I was surprised and actually worried that she didn't do anything. I felt bad then, and I pulled back slowly just to make sure she was still conscious, actually, as if she somehow wasn't just drowned in front of me. That was okay. That wasn't suddenly stunned by the UFO. Defeating them wasn't some sort of mind trick. After all, it was all too perfect, right? Wow, Jackie said, softly despite the look of surprise washing over her face. I think that, I thought you were gay. No. Oh. She paused, then gave this look of sheer intensity, like it was the most important thing she ever said. Well, I am. Huh? She groaned loudly. I I thought you were. I thought you were coming out. I thought we were coming out to each other. I thought that's what this was all. She curled up away from me. Wow, we are bad listeners. Well, I thought to myself, I did it. I fucked up the Hollywood ending for myself. The most contrived fucking greatest moment of my life. Outwitting aliens, not fucking up riding the jet ski into battle, not getting poison ivy on my crotch so far, is now a moment as painfully awkward as any other in my life. We didn't say anything else to each other for a while, for the longest moments of my life since seeing a UFO invasion. Hey, Seth and Tim paddled over in a small boat. Inside the boat was one of the egg UFOs. It was glowing softly. It appeared wrinkled with a black marbled surface. We found one. I think it's hurt or something. I was still gut-wrenched and felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I was far from my earlier buzz. What are we going to do with it? Tim said. Why do anything with it? We have to hide it. Hide it at your place. I don't want it at my place. Maybe your dad should look at it, Jackie. I was disconnected from the conversation as I slowly came to my feet and examined the egg. Its surface looked like a mix between eggshell, reptile scales, and metal. I didn't want to touch it. It seemed to be purring slightly. It struck me that the UFO, maybe all of the UFOs weren't necessarily mechanical in nature, but organisms. Animals themselves of a spacefaring alien nature. Maybe they were piloted by other aliens inside, but something told me that the eggs were actually their own individual living creature. My dad will just shoot it. Jackie rolled her eyes. How are we supposed to get it in the house? Seth left the boat and waded to the beach, pulling the boat along. Then he swung the dog-sized egg into his arm and lifted it into the beach, as if it weighed next to nothing. He then confirmed that it weighed next to nothing. It was then we heard voices and footsteps approaching from the bluffs around the beach. As the flashlight shone down, I could see the outline of my mother and Jack. Jack was incoherently muttering and swaying. He called down to us in a drunken bark. He shone his light on the egg and screamed out some sort of military designation and demanded that Seth drop the egg. Seth dropped it. It turned and emitted a dim green blast. Jack drew his pistol and opened fire. He dumped the entire magazine into the egg, and on the final shots, he seemed to succeed in blasting it to pieces as it erupted into a cloud of sparks, which all disappeared after bouncing around a few times in the sand. There's no such thing as UFOs, he yelled as he hit the sand, comatose once more. Mom seemed to be unfazed and walked away, back to the house, without further inquiry. I sat there as Jackie, Seth, and Tim shuffled back towards the cabins. I was fairly jarred by the gunfire. I was pretty jarred by everything. I couldn't remember when I felt such a swing of fortune, or felt so alone. I was wet, getting cold. I was being eaten alive by mosquitoes. But I stared on the beach until the sun came up. I was wired into a state of anguish. UFOs and alien invasions and being saddled with virtually no proof was far from my mind was fixated. I was fixated on Jackie. I eventually meandered back to the cabin, looking for a warm shower and something to soothe the bug bites. I climbed over Jack, who was still snoring in the sand. The cabin was dark in all the windows. Clearly Mom and Dad were asleep still, probably terribly hungover, probably very confused. I saw a few conservation police vehicles and tree trimming trucks speed down the side roads. No doubt they were surveying the mysteriously dehydrated trees turned to fire hazards which cropped up literally overnight. I had a strange feeling that somehow the authorities would cite fireworks for the event and would probably lead to a ban, because that's how typically things went. This is the first time I've spoken about this event since it happened, and that's probably because I made my mind up that morning that I would never tell anyone about it, mostly because only the four of us had any recollection of it. This is all ironic to me looking back, because cannabis is typically viewed as a memory loss drug. Anyway, I stood outside for a few minutes in front of my cabin, getting my head straight when Jackie rushed out of her cabin. "I know we've got some things going on," she said, "but I think you should go see it." I tilted my head. "See what?" "The UFO." "The UFO? Your dad shot it, and it exploded." Jackie looked at me with a groan. "You weren't nearly as high as I was. Come on, it's at Seth and Tim's place." "You can only see it when you're high. Seth said it was trying to communicate with you." I had been duped apparently by its beam into thinking it was destroyed, much like my mother and Jack. We pushed the skidoo back into the water from the little beach, and by some miracle it started again, and we jetted off for their cabin. Tim and Seth were outside smoking, with fistfuls of cash, laughing. It was a startling amount of money. They passed me a joint, and I puffed on it as they explained to me that the UFO was in the process of healing itself, and it more or less communicated gratitude towards them. It had some kind of living metal that could easily reproduce pretty much any other material that it wanted to create. In this case, Seth and Tim convinced it to make many, many, many $100 bills. Seth and Tim gleefully danced around the yard, exclaiming that they finally had enough money to move to California, a place they felt they could escape harassment as a couple. I went inside the cabin, where the egg hovered 6 inches above the wood floor. It was still pretty marbled and purring, but not as severely as the previous evening. I was feeling pretty warped when it trained its green ray on my head. With the blink of an eye, I could hear its thoughts and communicate with it. It also targeted Jackie, who apparently was having this intergalactic conference call with me. "I understand from the perceptions of the other superior beings that you are Simon, and you led the attack which repelled my mothership from the surface of your planet. From my limited ability to communicate with you, I offer gratitude toward you. You are a superior member of a superior species. You had the power to annihilate us, but you did not. Mercy is an advanced trait from which any otherwise war-minded species." I swallowed hard, but I played the role of the leader the alien demanded to be taken to. "We do not take kindly to the theft of our water." "Yes, we are the lead scouts of an expedition launched 10,000 years ago. We sought to extract 30% of the liquid water from your father planet. Based on our calculations, your species would have survived, and we have meant no specific harm to you. We miscalculated your development. We have no means of visual or audio or touch. We have extremely limited perception, especially when we are out of contact with the father planet, the mothership. While adept at navigating space, we rely on the senses and perceptions of the native species. But scanning your consciousness organ has created significant interference. Even now, as we communicate, I can perceive your thousands, millions thoughts, images, and worlds, and we cannot use or suppress such complexity. Nor can we surpass your advanced weapons. I was so fearful I collided with the mothership and was injured. The mothership has retreated to the far side of your natural satellite. She was waiting for me before we set course for our secondary extraction site." "Where's that?" "No place you perceive. Do not have concern. Our follow-up motherships have already diverted to the secondary site. We have no interest in making your species antagonistic towards us. We have no desire to come into contact with your Death Star or Starship's Enterprise." "How much time do you need? Do you require any help?" "I do not require assistance. My injuries will take an extremely short amount of time to repair. My travel to your moon will take significantly longer, but neither is perceivable compared to our lifespan." The rest of the communication wasn't necessarily something I would describe as verbal, but rather a series of impulses and feelings racing through my head. I learned that their lifespans were set on a cosmic scale, that their father planet is literally a single living mass the size of a planet that searches for possible resources and launches motherships. The egg expressed severe anxiety over explaining how superior humanity is. Of course, it didn't understand our brains run cannabis. It called Jackie and I incredibly finite organisms with infinite minds. It said it would be difficult for us, with all the stimuli and perceptions, to choose which to experience, to engage in with such a limited lifespan. And it expressed jealousy that though it may live long enough to see time stop and the universe exhaust itself of heat, all of its experiences and perceptions would be but a tiny fraction of what our minds can do in the moment. It was also envious of what it described as choice. In its mind, be born an egg, mothership, or father planet, which I perceived as the ability to discover our roles in life. It asked me if I desired anything, indicating that Seth, Tim, and Jackie had all made material requests of it as a goodwill gesture. It explained that the process by which it healed and maintained its outer shell was capable of duplicating most matter with extreme intricacy and detail. I told it that I had no such desire, and that I only wished to communicate with Jackie in private, and I bid it farewell and safe travels. It seemed to rest, and I lost the feeling of its mind in my own. Jackie and I walked outside. She was laughing about how they had fought off an alien invasion with weed and Roman candles. I was more serious, and she could tell. She became much more serious herself. I tried a few times to explain myself, then she tried, and it went on like that for a while, and it went nowhere. Eventually, she became upset with me. I can't remember exactly what up to it, but she started yelling at me. I don't want to hurt you, that's the point. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to make it to college. I'm not going to make it through college under the thumb of my dad expecting me to be Bobby or Mom. I liked you. I like you, but not the way that you want to be liked, apparently. She braced her hands together as she paced. And I'm sorry that's kind of on me. I can see your point, okay? I'm sure it was confusing for you, but I can't let that squish me either. I can't let your expectations become like theirs. She put her hands on my face, as I felt like she was again taking a crowbar and swinging it against my gut. I was trying very hard to not cry, but I probably did. What I did next is really bad. I've had a long time to wish I could take this back. I'm not a perfect man. I'm not a perfect person. And then I was in my 8th life crisis. And what I did next was very selfish. She cradled my face, and I tried not to cry, or I did cry. I gently pushed away her hands and leaned in to kiss her again. I kissed her on the mouth, and she froze. I stopped because it was like kissing stone. She burst into tears and said, I thought we understood each other. And I thought we did again. I understood you. I understand you. You don't get me. Understand this. This is the last we'll see of each other. Ever. She walked away, back to her family's cabin. I definitely cried this time. It was a go to bed without dinner kind of mid-morning. I went into my bedroom, and I drew the shades down and sunk into a summer's day shadow. At some point I fell asleep, and I stayed asleep until I saw red and blue flashing lights outside in the dark. I checked my watch, but it was broken. It was sometime at night. I figured the lights were from the conservation police and crews, but I came downstairs. I saw my mom and father conversing with a police officer. I choked up, and I guess somehow I already knew. Jackie drowned herself in the lake with rocks and rope. The next 3 days are lifetimes. I stared into the wood panels in my room, into the door handle in the car, and then the white paint in my home bedroom. A deep wound festered on me. It came from her own words, and it was in part responsibility for her choice. I was responsible for her choice. I had, in the span of a few hours, turned hero to less than zero. I turned into the fucking rope, and the stones bound to her legs and tied to her arms. At least one of them. It took some convincing, but I got my father to take me to the funeral, which was the state over in Craigstown. It was quite the drive, but I needed to see her, and I needed Jack Craig to know. I couldn't be the only one with blame and guilt. I was livid when I found the Craigs sporting their stoic bullshit. I made up my mind. I was going to get out there too and make them pay. I wanted to make him know his backwardness cost his daughter her life. Mr. Craig was alone by the food spread, out on a table in a side room away from the visitation parlor. He wore a blue Air Force dress uniform and had his suit jacket off. The asshole was still wearing his gun, as usual. I crept up behind him, and I did the second stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. I grabbed his gun out of his holster. He spun around, and I pointed it at him. I walked over to the door, to the room, shut and locked it. "Do you even know how to use that?" Jack asked calmly, stuffing cheddar cheese cubes into his mouth. I did not, and I succeeded only in accidentally dropping the magazine to the floor. He just came over to me casually and slowly twisted the rest of the gun out of my shaky, sweaty grip. Between munches and swallows, he told me, "I've seen a lot of people die. I've seen a lot of men kill. I've killed a good number of people. I could tell none of those things were on the table today. From you. But you have my attention." I didn't say anything. "You really loved my daughter, didn't you?" "Yes," I choked out. "I loved her more than you." "I don't know about that, son," Jack said lowly. "I think I could have tried to love her more, though. Something wasn't right. I was always worried it was you, somehow. Me? I didn't think you were good enough for her. I thought you were being a bad influence on her. All those summers, every time our families would meet, she would get worse. You're not her type. You're not the type of man she needed. She needed someone to dominate her, to provide her a role for her, or someone to nurture her dominant nature and let her excel. You're neither man." "No, Simon, let me tell you who you are. You're an unimaginative, non-committal little sheepshit, but just pathetic enough to run to escape, then accept your place. You are trash in the wind. You know no honor, no resolve. You only are recognized when you're blown into someone else's eyes. You're like your damn loser father. The only difference between you and him is that I still kind of like your father, because at least he knows his place now. And let me tell you, you say you love her. You can't possibly mean that. You're a young, dumb boy who will claim to love many things in the course of your meaningless life." "She was a lesbian," I blurted out. "To this day, I'm not sure I should have outed you, Jackie." Jackie Craig was your homosexual daughter. She couldn't stand these expectations you set for her. She couldn't ever be comfortable with herself, be the person she had to be, because you kept her down. I was fucking bad, but she couldn't bear to spend another minute in your home, much less another year. Jack reached down and picked up the magazine from the floor. He put it back in the gun, slowly, and then he slid it into the holster. He nodded a bit. "You're so overbearing and fucking unimaginative. or sheepy yourself. You either couldn't see or couldn't deal with it. I told him in no uncertain terms. He gritted his teeth and his eyes were wide with surprise. It was an anguish kind of surprise. "Simon," he said after piercing me with his eyes, "I've been fucking awesome at everything I've ever done. I wish I could have been a little more fucking awesome at raising my daughter." Jack fought back, visible grief. "Remember what I said, and when you're ready, take some firearms lessons, son. Every able-bodied man should be able to properly handle a handgun. Now excuse me." Jack fled the room, and I didn't know how to feel. But through it all, I felt oddly triumphant. I wish you could have seen it. I went to visit you in the visitation parlor. It was an open casket, since the body was in really good condition. She laid at rest, dressed in a bright yellow strapless summer dress, and, as a very odd choice, black combat boots. The boots were super distracting, and it took me a minute to get over them. I finally took it all in, the part about you being dead, as I traced up from the boots to your face. But before I got there, I noticed something. Your arm. There was no visible scar on your arm from the Roman candle last year. It should have been there. And then it hit me. I felt this incredible spring of incredible joy well up inside me. It occurred to me, somehow, the UFO made you a body double. And you tied that up to rocks and dumped it into the lake. You got out. I had this strange second thought at the time that I hoped you had the foresight to get the alien to counterfeit you some legal documents for yourself too, but, that's something for you now, not me. I never said anything to anyone about what I know. I often wondered if you attended your own funeral in disguise. This is the first time I've ever written any of this down. It's been a while since. Your father was an asshole, and I was an asshole, but I genuinely think that I have learned to love you how you wanted to be loved. And I needed to write this. I needed to get it all out on paper somewhere. I needed to tell you how I felt then, explain myself, and explain to you how sorry I am. How sorry I was, how sorry I am. I think you and I were always looking across paths through a confusing string of mirror and prisms. I think about how really out of sync we really were. I guess that's why I wrote this the way I did. It's not that you don't remember or I'm trying to insult your intelligence. It's just how we looked at each other, how we talked. It's very clear to me how far apart we were in that time and space, no matter how close I thought we were then. Even if everything turned out better anyway, we did it. It's been years and there's never been another secondary alien invasion. We did it. We fought them off with weed and Roman candles. Anyway, if you ever see this posted online, I want you to know that things are well with me. I'm starting my second year in a chemistry master's program, and I'm trying to get a job lined up, hopefully making fireworks, of all things. And so far, I'm loving it. I never thought I would be capable of it, but I am. I hope wherever you are, that whatever you're doing well. Thank you, the girl with the Roman candle scar.